This is something that I think we've lost in our culture. Modern society has lost. Look, we have no rites of passage for young people going into adulthood. Now, women will always, to a certain extent, have childbearing and childbirth as a rite of passage for a woman. But as a young man, there's no real meaningful rite of passage anymore. And, you look around the world, there were many cultures in which you would go off effectively either into the forest or to the jungle and be with yourself or a very maybe small group of folks for an extended period, often again fasting. Again, many cultures, both religious and otherwise, fasting is incorporated into those cultures. And we look back at some of this ancient wisdom that maybe we didn't know the science behind it, but we knew it was very good for you. It was very good for the mind to cleanse the mind and the body through autophagy and some of these other things.
Brother, joining me from beautiful Costa Rica when you're with your family, Thomas, thank you for taking the time. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure. Hopefully the internet cooperates. And you actually just caught me. I recently spent about a week in the jungle by myself with a machete, a hammock, and a bug net to just get right with myself, get right with God, and get clear on what's important.
Well, Thomas, that's the first thing I wanted to ask you because you said I've been here 3 weeks and then you're going to go and see your family in Maine. And one of my favorite things about successful people is when they use their success to make their life better, as opposed to just very financially successful people that are just always working, working, working. So when the video popped up and you're in a vest and your beard's long and you look happy and tan, like that made me happy that you're using your success, not just for financial, but to make your life better, which is what success is supposed to be about.
Couldn't agree more. If not, what's it all for anyway?
Yeah. So brother, can we talk a little bit about that week? That sounds incredible.
It was absolutely incredible. The first day was a little giddy, excitement, the build up, and I fasted as well. So, there was a lot of clarity. There was a lot of downtime. We spend a lot of time eating, a lot of time preparing and cleaning and doing all that. But the second and third day were a little hard. You still have a lot of the time left and you're going, wow, this is going to be a really long time. But then for me, I brought a bunch of books with me. I was journaling, I was reading, thinking about where I've come from, thinking about where I want to go, thinking about the things that are holding me back, and doing my absolute best to set goals that I think are meaningful goals for me for this next period in time in my life, the next chapter, while I've got young kids, while I've got a scaling business, and while I'm still physically as able as I'll be conceivably for the next 10 to 15 years of my life. So it was a really great experience. There was a vulture who circled me and came to land next to me that I think was waiting for me to die. But other than that, there was no, really profound moments or experiences other than the whole duration of the event it's great. A digital detox, no phones, no computer, no internet for a week. I mean, I was back in the jungle. I didn't see another human for a week. I didn't hear another human sound for a week. And it's really good. It's good to get that kind of space for yourself.
So was it just you or were you with the guide?
No, me, a hammock, a rain fly, a bug net, and my machete.
Wow. That's incredible. That's really incredible. So the only thing that I've done like that is when I went to Antarctica to run a marathon and there was no service. I was with a group though, so it wasn't quite the same. But it was just when you're cut off from everything, I felt like it really gave me time to think. And just there's so many stimulus at all times coming from us with our social stuff, with our work stuff, with our family stuff. It's so good and healthy just to go somewhere like that, to have to be cut off from everyone. And you can, like you said, you can really think about what's important.
Truly, the other thing that at least I noticed was when I'm in movement, even though I think I see the rest of the world in great detail, I don't think it's nearly as clear as when I get still. And a good example of that is, I'm getting really still. I'm sitting by this creek and I've been still for probably the last half an hour. And I start to see some pretty large freshwater shrimp that I otherwise hadn't seen, maybe 4 to 5 inches, start poking their heads out from underneath rock and scuttling back and forth. And I'm only able to have that kind of clarity because now I'm still and everything else gets much more crisp, much more detailed. And you're able to see those things without the relative movement that is our day-to-day life.
So did you fast the whole time?
Yes. I
Wow.
didn't bring any food with me. Water.
Just water. So how hard was that?
The first, I think, 2 days are the hardest, especially from a food standpoint. And then eventually you get into a state of autophagy. You get into a state where you're not eating. It quits screaming at you to eat and it just kind of accepts and says, okay, fine, you're not going to feed me. I'll go find food elsewhere. And you get again in that state of autophagy. And it gets relatively easy. I stop thinking about food. My stomach stops rumbling. A lot of the digestive system effectively stops or slows down so significantly, it becomes second nature. I wasn't running a marathon every day. I tried to do some light stretching and things like that. I wasn't trying to overexert my body when I'm in a fasting state. But it's incredible how much time you get back when you're fasting. And not to mention all of the health benefits and everything else. And frankly, I didn't want to lug a bunch of food into the jungle. It was quite a long hike.
That's incredible. And you've obviously got a good marriage. But when you said to your wife, hey, baby, you're alone with the kids. I need some time for myself. And she said, go for it. She knows you need it.
I think not only does she know I need it, I think she was encouraging of it. Like, yes, go think about the things you've done. Like, I say this in a loving way, but like, go sit in the corner and think about what you've done. So no, it was really good. Very supporting, fantastic. She was really excited for me to have that time because again, you get to reflect and you get to really get clear on what's important. And I was actually supposed to come out. I came out about a little bit earlier than I anticipated staying. I anticipated staying just another day or so longer, and I came out a little bit sooner because I wanted to catch one last sunset with my family at the ocean before we left. So, and I was clear about that. I was clear that coming out early was purposeful insofar as I wanted to spend that time with the people in my life that I love and cherish more than anything. Right. It was incredible.
And Thomas, you said something very interesting. You said you want to be clear on what you want to get for this next chapter of your life. Maybe you could just give like a real brief summary of your past life up until today, just so people get a bit of a background, and then I'd love to talk a little bit more about that next chapter.
I would love to. So my first, let's say the last 20 years, first 5 years of that were in the military. I was a combat medic, with you will, the Marine Corps, Fleet Marine Force Corpsman, multiple deployments. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And then the last 15 years, I've been in the real estate investment world, a broker, a developer, a lender, an investor, fund manager, all those things. And now getting clear about what's going forward, I'm really excited about using the built environment. I view this as our single greatest opportunity right now. The built environment is what makes mankind uniquely mankind. Not very many other creatures on the planet have homes and nests and things that they actually create for themselves. Well, we do. The built environment consists of 40% of our energy consumption globally. So the single largest draw of our energetic resources on the planet, material resources as well. And what I am looking forward to over the next decade plus of my life is using the built environment to foster health of the occupant, to foster increases in biodiversity. I'm here in the highest concentration of biodiversity on the planet in Costa Rica, to focus on, again, energy consumption and material resource consumption, on fostering connection among people using, again, smart design of the built environment. So we spend an enormous amount of our time when we're not on a solo retreat in the jungle. We spend an enormous amount of our time in the built environment. And I view it as our single greatest opportunity going forward. There's a ton of other opportunities between AI and technological advancements and everything else, but we literally spend all day, every day in the built environment.
When you were talking about, I feel like you and I are at similar stages in our life, Thomas, in the sense that we still have goals and dreams for the future, that we worked very hard to create a life that we love with our family. We both got kind of a young family, and I had this thought. My wife and I were talking about it. It's very hard, like when you look back and you say, "Oh, they were the golden years," or "They were the great times." It's very hard when you're in them to actually see them. And we talk a lot the last year or two about, like, these are the times, when our hope we're trying for kid number two. And hopefully when our kids have left, we'll look back at this period and this will be the time where, wow, it was just incredible. But it's so hard to see it. I don't know if you feel like that, but it's so hard to see it when you're always juggling so many things socially with your work, with your career, with your kids, with your family. You're trying to make time for just you and your wife. You're trying to be present with your kids. You're juggling so much, and you've got, your charity work, and you're trying to give back, and you're doing so much. It really does take what you just did to appreciate that and just see where you are and how far you've come and all the great things you've done. So I just think it's so incredible what you did, spending a few days by yourself and fasting too. It just makes it even more hardcore. But you make me feel guilty because I feel like I need something like that. I'm due, I'm due for a few days in nature by myself to really get clear on my next steps.
This is something that I think we've lost in our culture. Modern society has lost. Look, we have no rites of passage for young people going into adulthood. Now, women will always, to a certain extent, have childbearing and childbirth as a rite of passage for a woman. But as a young man, there's no real meaningful rite of passage anymore. And you look around the world, there were many cultures in which you would go off effectively either into the forest or to the jungle and be with yourself or a very maybe small group of folks for an extended period, often, again, fasting. Again, many cultures, both religious and otherwise, fasting is incorporated into those cultures. And we look back at some of this ancient wisdom that maybe we didn't know the science behind it, but we knew it was very good for you. It was very good for the mind, to cleanse the mind and the body through autophagy and some of these other things. So I think this is something that we really need to get back to, whether it's in small groups or individually. It is so good, so clean and healthy for us. My incessant addiction to my phone, when I got back to quote unquote the real world, there was almost 2 days I didn't look at my phone. I literally didn't look at my phone. And it was so, you don't realize the burden, the stress, the anxiety that you have of constantly looking at your phone because of the unpredictability. You look at some of the studies they've done. When you check your phone, if you knew every hour that you would get a new email, there's a certain amount of predictability around that. But when you check and there is no email, but then you check and there's that email that you've been waiting for, that variability makes the dopamine receptors really crave, and you go back and you go back and you go back. And that's why the Facebooks and Instagrams and all these things are just so powerful and pervasive in our culture. So I think that as a rite of passage, it's really interesting. And hearkening back to what you just said moments ago, these are the golden years. Right now, I've always been tickled, when everyone says, well, my retirement plan is to work for 40 years and then hopefully retire. I'm like, what? My plan is to work as hard as I can the next 5 and then be done, or 10 or whatever that is. Why? Because right now I'm hopefully the fittest I'll ever be. I'm the happiest. I've got all of the things are the best right now. And so this notion of the golden years being when you're in your 60s or 70s, like, no, those are the bronze years. These are the golden years right now, and then the silver, and then the bronze years.
That's so interesting what you said about you'll never be as fit as you are right now as well, because it's easy for me to look back. So I'm 45, and I think my athletic peak was probably 35, my last professional fight. And so it's easy for me to be like, oh, I've got more pains now, my lower back hurts more and everything. But if I just flip that, so I can lament and say I'm not 35 anymore, or I can say, you know what, at 65, how much would I kill to be where I am right now? And I think that's so true. So for the rest of my life, I've got to keep reminding myself that, hey, like it's only going to get worse. So I have to enjoy what I have today, because it's, I don't know if you've thought about this much, Thomas, but I never even thought about this until maybe the last 18 months or so. But just the idea of getting much older and it's hard to even do small things. So I'll be there like trying to open a really hard jar. And I'm like, man, this is hard. And I'm 45. What's it going to be like when I'm 70? Or like I was in the shower the other day doing something and the floor was a little bit slippery. And I was like, man, if I was 70, would I have just wiped out and broken my hip? And you start thinking like that. And it really is, some people think it's negative thoughts. Whereas for me, I think if you look back and you say, okay, if I'm on my deathbed and I want to make sure that I have no regrets, what do I have to do? I have to kind of look backwards and say, what do I have to do now to make sure that doesn't happen? So I think about death all the time. I think I love those stoic charts where they have all the weeks that you have it rested in your life and the amount you've lived versus what you have left. And it's a good visualization and reminder that time is so precious. And those people that have those cancer diagnoses where they only have a year or two to live, a lot of them say it actually gave them clarity, and they were a lot happier in the final years of their life because they knew how precious they were. But we all have an end coming. We just don't know when it is. So I think by trying to think on it, I don't find that depressing at all. I find it really inspiring and motivating to be my best self and not waste time.
100%. I love it. In Bhutan in particular, I know that they frequently will, in the culture, they talk about death, and you don't realize the people that get these cancer diagnoses, and you're hyper aware that when I take out my phone and I just lost a minute, and I kind of liken it to, my wife and I were just talking about this last night. Every now and then I go to Las Vegas for a conference or an event, and I go walking through the casino, and there are these people who are playing slot machines. If you enjoy slot machines, that's great, but they're playing slot machines, often kind of looking off in the distance as I'm walking by, just kind of hitting the button, not even looking at, what they're doing, but just hitting the button, maybe smoking a cigarette and having a drink. And it was just such a clear visual for me that that's almost what we're doing when we're wasting our life with our phone or with these other little things that we're not paying attention. We're just kind of hitting the button, not realizing that we're losing a minute or a dollar, and we're losing that minute or dollar. Whereas, put the phone down and go be with, my kids. You have a young child, and I'm only going to be cool for a few more years, in their eyes. And I'm so keenly aware of my coolness is very fleeting right now. They're not going to want to hang out with dad for much longer. And I used to, with my son, being a bad habit of, he'd say, "Hey, daddy, can you do this? Just a minute. I need to finish blank." And I've gotten in the habit now, because I know if that is my response, all too often the requests will stop.
Yeah.
I've gotten into the habit now, or at least I'm doing my best to be more aware of, whenever my kids ask to hang out and play, is immediately yes. Everyone else can wait. I was at a group function with some other amazing high performers, and they said, "My family calendar is in pen and my work calendar is in pencil." And I was like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. That is brilliant. That's how you know what the priorities are in life.
That's another reason I was so impressed. So you basically took pretty much the last month to be with family, right? You had 3 weeks Costa Rica, and then you're going to see family for Christmas.
Correct. We started the week of Thanksgiving. We were in Virginia for a week, and then the last 3 weeks in Costa Rica, and then about 10 days will be for Christmas in the New England area. So,
and when you're away, Thomas, how disconnect? Obviously, when you were doing your Solitude, that was completely disconnected. But now, how much are you checking in with work? How much do you have to do? How have you structured it so you can actually get a decent break?
I would say I'm pretty relatively connected even when traveling. And part of the reason for that is on obviously certain holidays, Thanksgiving, there's nothing going on. You're with family totally. And when I was in the jungle for a week, so I had to do a fair amount of prep on the front end. With that said, though, I'm finding that my productivity is actually increasing the less busy work I do. Activity does not necessitate productivity. It's the right actions and the right levers that are allowing me to be the most productive. A to B to C might not be nearly as fast as just A to C. And sometimes by slowing down, taking a step back, I'm able to see more clearly how me and my amazing team can get to where we're going faster by doing less, by actually doing less. I think that's one of the beauties of really great computer code or really beautiful poem or beautiful movie, is to be able to get to where you're going as succinctly as possible without a lot of superfluous work or scenes or lines of code.
That's a great point. Thomas, can I ask you when you look at your biography, when you came out of the military, you had your broker's license and you were doing brokerage, and that's what I do, a mixture of brokerage and development. And I'm trying to, like, my goal is to set up some type of closed-end development fund. And I was just talking to my wife about it, where it's kind of hard for me because my day job keeps me busy enough and is financially lucrative enough where it's almost enough, but it's not what I want to be doing in 5 years. So it's hard when when things are, it's like what they call the golden handcuffs. When you're getting paid,
Yes,
you're doing a career you don't like that much, but you don't dislike it enough to stop getting the big paychecks, you know? And that's kind of the situation I'm in with my career. How did you go from, it seems like you went from just doing brokerage and kind of getting learning a new business coming from the military into real estate to really scaling and being very, very successful and working with distressed debt and the things you did. How did you take that jump? Because I'm sure there were people when you had your license and you were doing just regular brokerage, there were people that were doing it with you that are still doing exactly the same thing today, whereas you've obviously scaled massively since then.
absolutely. I love the question, and I'm still striving to do this better and better every day. And that is, I do my best to stay in my zone of genius. And if it is not in my zone of genius, I must outsource it. I must delegate it. I must find someone else that oftentimes can do it better than I do it. Even if I can do a great job of it, if my zone of genius is just two or three things, those are the two or three things that I need to do because I'm making $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000 an hour doing those few things. And if it's not one of those few things, I have to get someone else. And networking and, being part of that is being out in the world, and part of brokerage is who you know and the transactions that you can facilitate. But once you have kind of high level agreement, immediately turning that stuff over to a transaction coordinator that pulls you, and not that you don't already know this, but that can pull you in if needed, if you get a little bit of friction point and a little bit of heat is starting to occur in the transaction. That way you can start to lean into those areas that, I don't know. There's a lot in business that I don't know how to scale a company from, a 9-figure company to a 10-figure company. So I need to learn that. And how can I learn that? Well, I have to free up time in my calendar somewhere. Where am I going to free that time up? Is it going to be in my zone of genius, the things that are making me really good paychecks? Or is it going to be in the checking the emails, or again, even if it's just capturing 10 minutes back, 15 minutes back by not being on social? I'm actually considering getting rid of my iPhone and getting an old flip phone, just because I will literally get rid of the temptation. And I'm the kind of guy who, if I have beer in the house or if I have other vices, I consume them, So my best advice to myself, future me is a very weak person. Future me is very weak. And so being aware of future me's weakness, present me tries to do the best I can to set up weak future me.
Really good. I love what you said about zone of genius too. You said something that I just want to repeat. You said things that you're not really great at or you don't have that much passion for. If you outsource it, the person you outsource it will probably do a better job than you because you're not really, it's something that you don't really enjoy doing anyway. But I find that's just so hard to do, especially for people that are just, they're go-getters and they just want to get things done. It takes a lot of, like you said, you're looking at your future self and you're thinking, if I keep doing this, I'm not going to be where I want to be in the future. So you have to be pretty ruthless about outsourcing this, outsourcing that. And that's something that I've just noticed with both myself and actually some of my close friends is we all struggle I think we all should be outsourcing more and we struggle to do it. Just because we have the mentality where I can do it pretty well. I'll just get it done. And it takes confidence to be like, no, it's time to go to the next level. And in that case, I have to free up my time by outsourcing the things I'm doing.
I was terrible about this early on in my career, and I've gotten a little bit better, but I still have a lot of room to grow. The old saying is, perfect is the enemy of good. Well, good is the enemy of done, right? Done is way better than not done. Right. And so I used to have a very high standard. I wanted it to be done perfect, and I would spend an enormous amount of time, right? Let's say I would spend 4 hours on something that is done perfectly. Well, I could have spent 2 on it and it was done really, really well. Or I can spend 5 minutes explaining it to someone who will do a good enough job. Yes. It's not perfect, but it's good enough for what my needs are. And that was something that I started to get really clear on, was just accepting that having high standards is absolutely important, but understanding other people are going to do it the way that they're going to do it. It definitely will not be the way that I'm going to do it. It's the way that they're going to do it. And if I want to have that time back to go do the other things that are important for me to get done the way that I want to do it, I need to accept this will be done the way that you want to do it. And this will be done to a slightly different standard of quality. And all of those things are, as long as it's for the right things, all of those things are okay. So that's, kind of one thought process. And then the other one is accepting that at the onset, it will be more work. Inevitably, it will be more work as you find the right people to delegate things to and the right team to build. I'm now having to teach you while we do it. So that's going to take me longer. Instead of it taking 1 hour, it's now going to take me 2 hours. And so today I had to pay the price, but now I've gotten an hour back every time I have to do this again in the future. I've gotten all that future time back.
That's definitely a great trade, right? To invest time now to save a lot more future time. Yeah, that's definitely true.
Well, yeah, sorry, one last thought there. I have found what has served me really well in life is to future live, try and project out 5 years in the future. And okay, if I was a billionaire, would I be doing this? And if the answer is no, then I probably shouldn't do this. I should probably delegate it or just not do it, whatever it is. Or if I was a very successful person, whether it's billionaire or whatever that measurement is, if I was in a successful marriage 50 years from now, and I try and look back when I'm 80 and say, when I'm 80, will I be happy I did this? Will I be happy I went to that party or ran that half marathon? What will I be happier that I did?
Yes.
Or will I went to this conference, or will I be happier that I spent that weekend with my wife on vacation? And sometimes it is go to the conference because it's a conference that I'm excited about and I'm really passionate and there's a lot of good people there. And sometimes it's spend that time with my family or friends. So when I try and future live and look backwards, it gives me at least a lot more clarity instead of kind of projecting forward. I like to kind of future live and then look backwards.
Oh, I love that. You said something earlier about when you were on your retreat and you were journaling, that it wasn't like you had this crazy breakthrough, like, oh my God, I got to make all these massive changes in my life. I'm not sure exactly how you phrased it, but it seemed like it was something you needed, but it wasn't. If your direction of your life was completely off and you go and spend 5 days in the jungle by yourself, maybe you'll realize like, hey, I'm doing the wrong thing. But obviously you're a very thoughtful person. You've been spending years creating this life you have. So it's not like there's going to be a massive change. And I thought that was so interesting because you reminded me of when I have this friend and he said, I have two lives. And the first began after my first ayahuasca experience in Peru. It changed everything for me. And since then he's done a bunch. And this was many, many years ago back where it's becoming a bit more common now. But I remember talking to him about 8 years ago. And I said, I'd really hearing you talk about it. He's a jiu-jitsu friend. Shout out my buddy Nick. And we were in Zanzibar training in Tanzania. And he said, don't worry. He said, the next trip I do, we'll do it together. We'll do ayahuasca. I want you to experience this. So I've done 2 weekends with him at Joshua Tree. And the reason I wanted to do it is because I've always been pushing boundaries and searching for things and trying to find answers to live the best life. And I thought, wow, this could be a crazy thing that I'm going to unlock. And I'm going to find all these things that I didn't know that existed. And I'm going to make these huge life changes. And it was exactly like you said. The first time I just got this incredible appreciation it was almost like I saw myself and it was like, man, just look at the things around you and in front of you and be so happy and grateful for them. Don't be looking in the future or things that aren't important. Like focus on what you have because it's beautiful. And the second time I went, my wife was pregnant and it was a 2-day weekend. And after the first day, I was being told just like, what are you doing here with these bunch of guys in the desert? You need to be home with your wife. And there's nothing for you to get here. So I'm one of those people that I like to see things through. And I said, I'm so sorry, guys, I've got to go. And I left and I went home. But I thought it was so interesting because that was the same thing that you had said about it wasn't something incredibly unique that I got. It was just a bit of clarity. And I thought that was really, really useful.
Yes, and indeed. And exactly your experience in the second journey that you went on, where you had this realization your wife is pregnant and you're with a bunch of probably great, fine gentlemen, but you're not with your pregnant wife. And you kind of go like, what are you doing? Go get back and be with that person that's growing, that little human that's going to be, one of your best friends for the next 60, 70, 80 years. And that was a little bit of the similar experience that I've had a few really deep journeys like that as well, where you get these, I almost want to call it not an insight as if something you didn't know. It's almost like something that you remember. I think when we're kids, we got a lot more insight an awareness of our deep connections to one another. I think kids don't. And just a few moments ago, I talked about future living in the sense that, when I'm planning and when I'm thinking about the things that I want to do, I future live. But I think a lot of our anxiety comes from future living, if you will, worrying about things in the future, right? But if you're just present to the moment, well, what might happen with the stock market tomorrow? Like, who cares? You don't know. So don't stress out about it. Just be present to the moment. And tying back to, what you're saying, when you are present to the moment, there's something just so sweet about life that I feel is salient beyond words. I've been on a few journeys that you can't communicate the level of depth and connection that I have felt to every other human, every other living thing on the planet and in the universe. On some of these journeys, you just feel, again, it's not like I learned something. I was just made aware of something that was already there, which was this deep personal connection with only everything.
It's so interesting the way that mind works, Thomas. You just reminded me. Yesterday, I was getting my teeth cleaned, and my friend has a dental practice, and his new hygienist. He was telling her about me. He's like, "Oh, you got to meet my friend Lawrence because we both worked on the Chicago Board of Trade 15 years ago." And I didn't know. She kind of looked familiar. I don't think I'd ever spoken to her. She was one of those people where she was actually pretty focused to work, and I was incredibly focused to work. But just we have a lot of mutual friends, so she was talking about these people and the amount of memories that I'm there, mouth open, getting my teeth cleaned, and my mind is just getting flooded with all these great memories of these wonderful times with these great people. And it's been years, and I'm one of those people where when I finish kind of periods in my life, I don't really look back. So I went from being on the floor, making all this money trading, to completely leaving that world and going into martial arts and competing and fighting. And for me, that was so hard and all encompassing mentally that I almost forgot about my past life. And that's actually one of my regrets is I wasn't the best with maintaining some of the friendships. And there were some older guys there. This one particular guy was my financial backer, and he was a really great mentor. And he had this incredible story. And I wish I think he might have passed away now. He was very, very old 50 years ago. And I have no idea, where he is or what he's doing and things like that. I'm like, I wish I'd been a bit better about kind of maintaining some of these friendships. But it's so hard when you're very busy. You can't maintain every friendship you had. Otherwise, you'll never get anything done. You'll spend all day just talking to people, like old friends. So I always find that so tricky to know when to nurture things because there's so many people in my life that I genuinely care about. And I love when I spend time with them, but I don't see them very much because we're all busy, and especially this time of our life. And that's why I thought it was so interesting that I think it's so great that you took the time to think about it, because there's going to be very few times in our life that are more busy than now, where we're trying to maximize time with our young family, and we're trying to figure out the next stage of our life with our business, and we have all these interests and things that excite us. It's the best of times, but it's also the busiest of times, and that's something that I struggle with. I want to have 30 hours in every day for the things that I want to do, and I can't, so I have to cut things out that I want to do and certain people that I'd love to see. And you have to be kind of ruthless because we've got to prioritize our limited time.
100%. And something that I've worked to start to get clear on and accept is we have seasons, and there's going to be groups of friends and seasons and chapters in our life that will conclude, and some of those friends will carry over into future chapters, and some of those won't. And I think it's okay accepting that. Well, I mean, it has to be. We just have to learn to accept it. But being really clear and thoughtful about those relationships that not only I think that we can be of use in our life, but then also, one of my mantras when I was in the jungle was, I'm blessed, I am thankful, I am humble. I surrender so that I can be of service. And sometimes in life, I find that the most wonderful, rewarding, fulfilling things are not the things that I'm doing as a means to my own happiness, because I don't think happiness, can be reached as an objective. It's a tangential thing that you in pursuit of those things in life that give you meaning, that you find purpose in. And some of those things are mundane and small, and spending time with my kids or helping someone, cross the street, whatever those little things in life are. So being just hyper aware that life has seasons, and the pursuit of relationships for the right people in the right seats for the right time. And, one of the books that I was reading talked about, you start like building a business, for example, and there's certain people on the bus. Those people that start on the bus with you will likely not be all of the same people, the cast of characters, at the end of the bus ride. You're going to have to swap some of those folks out because they might have reached their limit or the relationship may have run its course, whatever those things are. So accepting closure and welcoming closure, knowing that we have limited capacity to manage a certain number of relationships in our life. And when certain people go away, that opens the door for new, exciting relationships. And I'm a sucker for new, man. Shiny object syndrome.
No, that's so true. That is it. Dunbar's number, that's something like 150. It's just so hard. Yeah, it's so hard for us to have more people. And if you have interesting lives like you and I have, and multiple different careers, you do meet so many people. And you're right. You have to recognize the seasons of your life, and that's something. I mean, I don't like the cold. I'm trying to embrace the season of the winter in the Midwest, because one of my friends was telling me yesterday, he's like, "Oh, don't you love Christmas?" And I was like, "No, really." It's like, I love the summer. I love getting out of the cold plunge and drinking my coffee with my shirt off in my front yard while my kids and my dogs are playing and I'm getting some vitamin D. That's what I love. I don't love the cold, but I'm trying to embrace it. And I've been doing some training. I think I might be doing another marathon, and I've really been enjoying these cold winter runs by myself. I just think I'm actually enjoying them. I downloaded, I've listened to them before, but I read them before, but I got the audiobooks of David Goggins' 2 books, and I'm just listening to them, but I'm doing these cold, miserable runs, and it's been great. So I'm trying to enjoy the seasons, because like you said, life is about seasons. And, just because summer's my favorite doesn't mean that I can't enjoy winter. It's going to be different.
I love it. Well, I've got a question for you. What does the future hold for you? You want to get into development, it sounds like, in a big way, and maybe have a closed-ended development fund. What's exciting for you? I mean, what's nice about talking towards the end of the year? So I think everyone's starting to do some planning for the next year and the next season. So what's in store for you?
I love the idea of, like you said, I don't like saying I'm above certain things, because I try and keep humility, but there's certain things that I do where I'm just like, I shouldn't really be doing this at this stage of my career. So
Right.
I love what you said about the zone of genius. I think my zone of genius will be trying to blend my knowledge of real estate development with my background in finance, and having some type of closed-end development fund. I think I could do really well financially, and I think it will be really challenging. So if I did that, I think that my biggest thing was trying to I like the idea of having a partner. So either a partner that's in charge of the development while I raise the funds, or maybe I partner with someone who's raising the funds while I'm managing all the developments. I like the idea of doing it. When I think back to my trading company, I had the best years I had were when I had a really good partnership with just myself and my one partner, and things were really great. And then he had a bit of a breakdown. He was a big partier and started taking drugs, and had a bit of a collapse, and everything went south after that. And then we stayed together working for a while he was going through all these personal issues, and it was just an absolute nightmare. And then I went off on my own. We kind of split the company up into 2. And then when I was doing it by myself, I realized that it wasn't as fun anymore, because part of the fun was he and I, every Friday would go to this Thai restaurant and we'd talk about the week, and we'd troubleshoot and we'd plan. And it was that friendship and the social aspect of building something together that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the work too, but it wasn't as fun when it was just me. I realized that it wasn't as fun. So I'm trying to figure out the right partnership for that.
You've done a lot of amazing things in life, a lot of really, really cool things, amazing things in life. I've had the pleasure and the joy of doing some wild things in life. And my life has been very close to coming to an end on a few different circumstances. And one of those things that I enjoy and I've loved doing is base jumping. And I've gone base jumping solo. I've gone by myself, hiking up in the mountains or wherever that is, solo. And I have a lot of fun doing that solo. But the absolute most fun I ever have is when I'm on a jump with someone, and we get to jump and look each other in the whites of our eyes, because you are so present to that moment. It's euphoric bliss. You are just experiencing it. And building a business by yourself is lonely, man. It's lonely. I've done it. It's lonely. everything and anything in life is more fun when it's shared. We are social creatures, and there's a direct correlation between our social connectivity and our lifespan. And, getting back to that, sharing things in life is where I get the absolute most fun, the most enjoyment, the most pleasure. And ironically, that's when I push myself the hardest. It's kind of, you've got this group there that's pushing, and I'm competitive. I certainly know that you're competitive, and you look over your shoulder and they kind of go here and you go, oh, okay, all right, well, maybe I can go here a little bit, but it's in a really fun, enjoyable camaraderie way. So I think that I'm not sure if there's many things in life that aren't better when shared. There's probably a few, but not many.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love that. Thomas, so when you're base jumping, it's so funny when I talk about risk and danger because people are like, man, you're a professional fighter. But for me, the difference, I'll give you an example. My brother and my brothers, we were close growing up, and then we were very different people. So we grew apart as adults. And I remember he sent me a message. He's like, hey, I'm getting a motorbike. And we were in our 20s. And I told him, I said, hey, at the time, there was a very famous fighter, and his young son had died in a motorcycle accident. And I just told him, I said, listen, like, I think you're crazy. I know how much fun they are riding them, but the risk and reward is not worth it. And he ignored me. He didn't even respond. And then he had a great time for about 2 years. Then he had a really bad accident, broke his hip, had all these pins in his legs, sold his bike, and he'll walk with a limp for the rest of his life. So it's one of those things where I look at everything through what is the risk, what is the reward. And the way I look at when I was fighting, I didn't even think about the risk. But now when I look back, I'm like, man, even today, I'm like, I think my mind is okay. I think I'm fine, but who knows if I'm going to have cognitive effects of that in 20 years. I didn't know at the time that I basically would wear out both my elbow joints from boxing, like all these things that the price you pay for in the future for the things you do when you're young, you don't realize at the time. But for me, I mean, let me know, but isn't base jumping insanely dangerous? And I know you have a lot to live for and a lot you love. How do you see the risk reward of that?
Great question. I get that all the time. And your brother, I'll make an assumption. He was in a motorcycle accident driving around on the streets, I assume.
Yes. A mile from his house. Yep. A mile. And the lady didn't see him, pulled out in front of him, and he went over. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I've actually got same thing. I've got a scar here on my shoulder from a guy that ran a stop sign, didn't see me, hit me. I've got a big scar on the back of my head, bunch of staples, that whole thing. So I'll liken this to motorcycle riding. You can put on leathers, put on a helmet, go around the racetrack, and the odds are you're going to have an amazing time, so much fun, and you're in a hyper safe environment relative to the dangerous nature of the sport, right? Whereas you could be out cruising at 40 miles an hour and get killed because some person doesn't see you, they run an intersection, and you're dead, right? Same thing with base jumping. I can go base jumping, put on the GoPro, and try and get the very best shot for my YouTube channel to get all the likes and really get down in that line and have no margin for error and potentially die. Or I can go with some friends and we can say, if the winds aren't perfect, if my gear's not perfect, if everything is not perfect, we don't go, So it's kind of back to that motorcycle analogy, I'm going to the right venue with the right emergency services, with the right equipment, with the right ground crew and pit crew with me, instead of just freewheeling it out on my own, taking excessive risk without somebody saying, hey, man, I know that you said you wanted to fly this particular line, but like we haven't jumped in a month and that line is a tight line. Like, let's just jump and fly over all of it and not even fly the line. Let's just go have fun. Because, I've got buddies who are 10 feet off the ground and they're having 100% of the fun, 100%. I can, zero margin for error. I can be 150 feet off the ground, have 99% of the fun, and have a substantial margin of error. So that's what I see. Well, isn't that dangerous? Yeah, but there's like a safe way to do dangerous things. And there's a dangerous way to do dangerous things. Arguably flying is dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous. That's why the FAA has mandated, annual checks and pilot currency requirements and maintenance schedules and all of these other things that you have to adhere to, because we've determined this is the safe way to do a dangerous thing, like fly 500 miles an hour at 6 miles above the earth. This is the safe way to do it.
So
Yeah,
you're very, very calculated and careful. So while it is a dangerous thing, you do your best to eliminate as much of the danger when you do it.
exactly. Because in my experience, very, very rarely does the gear fail, right? It's, people have asked me, well, like the wings of a plane aren't just going to fall off typically. Like it has happened once or twice, but typically that's not why the plane falls out of the sky and you die. It's because it's nighttime, you flew into clouds and bad weather, and then you ran out of fuel and you had no good options. So in some of these instances, it's typically, and this is in business, this is true in relationships, this is true in extreme sports, it's a compounding of seemingly small and innocent deviations or mistakes that eventually get you to the point of catastrophic failure. It's not that one little mistake, it's those 3, 4, 5 mistakes that you made that now resulted in you having no margin for error. And then you made that last mistake that killed you. So it's, hey, the winds are left to right. Okay, good. That's what we wanted, versus, oh, these winds are right to left. If that's the only thing that's wrong, well, that's fine. But now that they're right to left, if I jump and my parachute's twisted, that's blowing me into these power lines, which is just a no-go. If my parachute opens fine and I fly away, it'll be fine. It will be totally fine. But if there's something that I didn't calculate and I've got no margin for error, then I'm hosed, right? So that has been my experience, at least in aviation and extreme sports, is it's the compounding effect of human error. In general aviation, I think human error accounts for something outrageous like 95% of fatal crashes. And it's usually one of two things. It's fuel mismanagement, right? Like they just ran out of fuel, or unintentional flight into bad weather, right? We took off, the weather looked good, and the weather changed, and now we find ourselves in a bad situation. And so I do everything that I can to minimize all of these little things that can insidiously creep in. And I've got a business partner that calls it the creep, and you have to be, as you said earlier, you used the word a couple of times, and I think it's the perfect word. You have to be ruthless, almost tyrannical about where you draw the line, and then having a rigid boundary. Like this is true with kids. Just one? I said none. Because now if you push back and one turns into two turns into, and now we've established a precedent. No means no. And now my kids know, like if I say no, they're just like, oh, forget it. I'm going to go ask mom. She might cave. Daddy doesn't cave. So.
Well, Thomas, I love that. Okay. So that expression, how you do something is how you do everything. Your explanation for you managing risk base jumping, it also explains to me why you're successful in business, because you're looking at something very detailed and you're analyzing everything. That was really impressive.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Good.
Thomas, before we wrap up, I do want to ask you something, because you obviously love your kids. And I heard something I want to share with you and ask your opinion. So I was talking to a friend of mine who's very successful, and he's got his first son who's 1. And he told me he's really focused. One of his goals is, I want to read a book every other week, and I really want to work on myself and try and figure out how best to do things, because I don't want my son to regret things when he's older, the way I acted. And I thought that was so interesting, because number one, I think it's great that he's so passionate. He's an older dad like me. He's in his 40s. I think it's great that he's so passionate about trying to be the best father. But it reminds me of something. I have a good friend, and he said, anytime we come to a decision, we always do things from a position of love or from fear. And I thought when he said that, I was like, man, that's kind of doing it from a position of fear almost, that he's almost scared that his son is going to resent him or be upset with him when he's older. And I asked him how his upbringing was. And he was like, it was a different time. I think my parents did the best with what they had, but I want to do better. And I thought it was just such an interesting thing, because I've never thought that. I've never thought my son I'm sure I'm going to make mistakes and he's going to have resentments, but I've never actually thought, I don't want I worry that my son is going to resent me when he's older, because one thing I'll know is that my son will know when he's older that I did the best with what I had, and I think, so I was so curious your philosophy on, raising children, because I know you're a very calculated, thoughtful person. So I don't know if you have any thoughts as well in this last week when you were just journaling about that, but I feel like that's going to be, you and I have our dreams and we have our side passions, but the most important our real gift when we're older, the thing we're most proud of is, I think, is going to be our parents when they're wonderful young adults, right?
Yes, undoubtedly. But my three biggest projects are, and my most beautiful projects are my marriage and my two kids. So those will hopefully be the best projects of my life. And what I've been doing lately is explaining to my kids. When I start getting a little tightness or a little frustration, and I say, I ask my kids to do something, and I'll say, "Hey, listen, I'm not feeling listened to right now, and I'm allowing myself to get a little angry." I've tried to remove make from my vocabulary, because I think that removes ownership from, you're making me so mad right now. Like, I'm choosing to be mad, and
Yes.
that's my choice. But I'm going, listen, and then I'll just ask them, if someone wasn't listening to you, how would you feel? Well, I'd feel a little upset. And listen, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I wasn't raised in a family that had a lot of insight into their emotional capacity and intelligence. And I think that this has been kind of a generational thing that's happened over time, where we're getting much more insight into, the people with really high EQs are sometimes among the most successful people on the planet, because at the end of the day, AI is making the buy sell decision. At least it didn't used to, right? For buying houses and buying some of these things. Humans make the decisions. Humans are making the sales. And I'm trying to humanize a lot of the experience as a parent to my child. So like sometimes when I get really mad or something, I'm like, "Hey, I'm getting really mad right now because you're not listening to me, man. I've asked you 3 times. What is going on? What do I have to say right now for you to listen to me? Please, do you understand why I'm so frustrated?" And my 4-year-old son, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think at the end of the day, more important than all of that, more important than, I definitely agree with like the fear and resentment thing, operating from a place of fear, that is, your energy is now going to fear, and you're watering the fear plant.
Yeah.
And you will find, wherever you look, you will find evidence to support your narrative, wherever you look, and so being thoughtful about my narrative and where I'm watering, because that will produce the evidence that I'm looking for to reinforce my narrative. And that was something that I got really clear as a parent. And I saw this little clip the other day, is like trying to be a mental ninja with my kids. We just had some people over a few minutes ago. "Hey, check out, these are such well-behaved kids. Look, they'll play by themselves together. They're so sweet together. They'll play by themselves for hours, and then off they go. And I don't hear from them for 30 minutes or an hour. They're playing by, because I'm the one that's trying to, I think of myself, and I know that we probably have to wrap up soon, but I think of myself as a farmer in a lot of ways. And I'm farming ideas and people. As a leader, you're farming and you're cultivating people, and you're trying to plant the right ideas within yourself and within them. And I'm watering those ideas. I'm watering the idea that you play with your sibling really well. I'm watering that idea. These parents are like, "Oh, these little monsters." I'm like, they hear you, man.
Yes.
They hear you. They're going to live up to the expectation that you have now set for them. Set better expectations. My grandfather used to tell me, "Hey, you have to be a man of your word. You do what you say you're going to do." I've just taken that one step further, which is just say cool stuff. Just only ever say cool stuff, and then you got to do it because you said it.
I absolutely love that. You're talking to them like little adults, and yeah, the way you said is so true. They're hearing everything. You say, "Oh, these little monsters," or these little shits. They're hearing it. So, words have power, and they're going to live up to it, whether they're good or bad words. So, brother, I'll let you get back to your beautiful family. Thomas, it's always so nice to talk to you, man. you're such a kindred spirit, and I just love the way you think. And you've inspired me to. I've got to figure out a time where I can spend a few days, and I gotta do a fast too. I'm sure my body needs it, but just spend a few days and really clarify my thinking. So I appreciate you so much. Thank you for taking this time on vacation, and enjoy family time. And thank you, man. Thank you so much for being you. And just I'm so glad we connected.